In this video, we delve into a section from Helena Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, specifically the passage titled The Night of the Universe. This section interests me because Blavatsky isn't simply engaging in vague esoteric speculation. She's presenting a serious philosophical perspective, though framed within an esoteric tradition. While it's true that much of what circulates in esoteric circles lacks depth or coherence, there are also thinkers within that realm who offer profound insights worth taking seriously. The key point here isn't whether something is labeled esoteric or not, but whether it supports a metaphysical framework I aim to highlight on this channel, namely idealism. Idealism stands in direct contrast to materialism. In materialist thought, matter and the physical world are seen as fundamental, while consciousness and life are byproducts of a lifeless, mechanical universe. Idealism reverses this. It holds that life, mind, and consciousness are the true foundation of reality, and that the material world is a secondary expression, a manifestation within a living, intelligent universe. Blavatsky arrives at this view through the lens of Eastern philosophy, drawing from sources such as the Yogacara school of Buddhism, the Vedas, the Upanishads, and Vedanta. These traditions align closely with Western currents of idealist thought, including those of Plato, the Neoplatonists, and later thinkers like Kant, Schopenhauer, and others. Here, parent space is described as the eternal and ever-present origin of all things, the unfathomable divine essence. Its invisible robes symbolize the mystical source of all substance and the very foundation of the cosmos. Space, in this view, is the one unchanging constant, untouched by the existence or absence of the universe as we perceive it. It is entirely abstract, beyond measure, and exists independently of all else. The first emergence from this causeless root is spirit, which precedes and gives rise to both spirit and matter as we understand them. As taught in esoteric traditions, this primal essence is neither a barren emptiness nor a fully formed presence, but rather contains aspects of both. It always was and always will be. The robes mentioned symbolize the essential nature of undifferentiated cosmic substance, not matter in its familiar form, but its spiritual essence. This essence is inseparable from space in its most abstract expression, co-eternal with it. This root nature is also the origin of the subtle, unseen forces that animate visible matter. It can be thought of as the soul or inner life of the infinite spirit. In Hindu philosophy, this principle is known as Mula Prakriti, the primal substance that serves as the foundation or carrier for all phenomena, whether they manifest physically, mentally, or psychically. It is from this root that akasa, the subtle cosmic medium, emerges. When the text speaks of the 7 eternities, it refers to immense spans of time, periods beyond ordinary comprehension. Unlike the theological idea of eternal time, which is often linear or future-oriented, these ages represent cycles, vast epochs encompassing the rise and fall of universes. The terminology used in Western traditions doesn't fully capture this concept, as such expressions only make sense in the context of the one eternal existence, and were foreign to philosophical systems before the influence of institutional religion. These 7 cycles correspond to grand cosmic phases within what is known in Eastern teachings as a Great Age, an incomprehensibly vast duration made up of alternating periods of manifestation and rest. These epochs are measured in symbolic and sacred terms, rooted in a logic where numbers represent qualities and principles rather than quantities alone. Each calculation, to be meaningful in the esoteric sense, must be built from the sacred pattern of sevens, a number that lies at the heart of divine mysteries. According to ancient systems like the Kabbalah, 7 reveals the secrets of divinity, while 10 marks the full scope of human understanding. Even higher numbers are considered to hold symbolic weight, representing magnified expressions of these core principles. Within this framework, the number 4 represents the masculine principle only in the most abstract realms. In the material domain, 3 symbolizes the male and 4 the female, the vertical and the horizontal, which, in the evolution of symbols, came to embody the generative powers in the physical world. The Vishnu Purana explains that what is called immortality refers merely to continued existence until the end of a world cycle. As one translator notes, according to ancient teachings, even the gods are not truly eternal. They do not vanish, but rather are reabsorbed into the greater whole when the cosmic dissolution occurs. Esoteric philosophy affirms this view, clarifying that these divine beings are not destroyed but return to the source from which they emerged. Time itself is not an absolute reality, but an illusion that arises from the sequence of shifting states of consciousness as we move through unending duration. Where there is no conscious awareness, time does not function, it remains dormant. What we call the present is no more than a conceptual dividing line between what we perceive as the future and what we recall as the past. In truth, nothing in the world possesses lasting existence, for all things are constantly changing. No form remains the same even for a fleeting instant. What we perceive as the present moment is merely a blurred perception caused by the rapid succession of fleeting impressions received through the senses, as phenomena flow from the realm of possibility into the realm of memory. This experience is akin to the lingering trace left on the eye by a flash of light, not lasting in itself, but appearing to persist because of the limitations of our perception. The essence of a person or object is never confined to what appears in a single moment, but consists of the totality of its states and transformations from its first emergence into matter until its final disappearance. These complete expressions of being are present in potential long before they manifest, and continue to exist in the realm of memory long after they have passed from material view. One could not reasonably claim, for example, that a piece of metal ceases to be itself the moment it enters the water, simply because it is no longer in the air. The object does not consist solely of the thin slice that intersects with our senses at any particular moment. Rather, it is the entire object, passing from one condition to another. In much the same way, beings and forms appear to us only in brief glimpses as they travel through space and time, crossing from one timeless condition to another. It is within that deeper flow of duration, the movement from pre-existence to fulfilled memory, that real existence lies, if only our faculties were able to perceive it fully. The mind, in this framework, is understood as the collective term for the varying modes of consciousness, such as thought, will, and emotion. During deep sleep, when mental activity on the physical plane is suspended, the memory also withdraws, and for that time, the mind as we know it seems to vanish. This is because the physical mechanism through which the inner self expresses itself is momentarily at rest. For anything to appear on a given level of being, it must find the appropriate medium through which to manifest, and in the long interval of rest known as cosmic dissolution, all forms are withdrawn, and only the possibility of mental action remains, an abstract, undivided awareness that underlies all future manifestations of mind. The spiritual beings known in various traditions, whether as angels, divine messengers, or luminous intelligences, serve as the channels for this universal thought and intention. These entities are not simply representations of natural forces, but are conscious agents that help bring order and law into being. Yet they too are guided by higher intelligences beyond themselves. This vast order of spiritual beings, which enables the universal mind to act, may be compared to a great army, organized into distinct levels, each with its own role, identity, and limited autonomy. Each group operates within a larger collective, serving a purpose beyond its individual interest, and in turn encompassing smaller units within itself. There are various ways by which one may approach the bliss that lies beyond all forms of existence, a state not of nothingness, but of absolute being, pure awareness, and unconditioned presence. These paths were not active in the beginning, for the universe itself had not yet emerged. At that point, all was contained in divine ideation alone, without form or motion. There exists a chain of causes and effects that governs the arising of sentient life. Each link in this chain gives rise to the next, and each is the inevitable outcome of what came before it. This sequence belongs to a system of understanding rooted in a doctrine that speaks of four fundamental truths, truths which characterize the older school of thought often referred to as the lesser vehicle. According to this view, The entire cycle of becoming is driven by an unbroken law of cause and consequence, giving rise to both merit and fault, and eventually bringing the law of moral causation, karma, into full force. Within this system, rebirth is not considered a blessing but a condition to be feared, as existence in the world inevitably brings suffering, pain, and sorrow. Even death offers no escape, for it merely opens a passageway to another incarnation, following a brief interlude of rest in a temporary state of peace, a subtle afterglow of desire and illusion, but not true liberation. This older school, though ancient, exists alongside a later developed system known as the greater vehicle. While appearing distinct in form and emphasis, both streams preserve a core teaching, that deliverance from the cycle of birth and death is possible, not through external rites or heavens, but through inner awakening. The term vehicle itself is symbolic, suggesting a means of conveyance toward the goal of freedom, both perspectives affirming that it is knowledge and insight alone that can dissolve the illusions created by ignorance. Illusion, or Maya, permeates all that is finite. Nothing in conditioned existence possesses absolute reality, for what we see is shaped entirely by the limitations of perception. Just as an untrained gaze may view a painting as random blotches, while a practiced eye immediately discerns form and meaning, so too does reality shift in appearance depending on the clarity of the consciousness perceiving it. Nothing endures except that which lies behind appearances, the one eternal essence that holds within itself the origins of all forms. All beings, even the most exalted spiritual intelligences, are in some degree only projections, like shadows cast by light through a prism onto a screen without color of its own. Still, these projections are not false in an absolute sense. They are relatively real, because the one perceiving them is also part of the same reflection. The sense of reality they hold is therefore authentic to the perceiver. The truth of any phenomenon must be sought not in its fleeting moment of material manifestation, but in what it was before, and what it continues to be after it has disappeared from view. Yet, as long as our instruments of perception are limited to the physical senses, we are unable to grasp these deeper truths directly. On any given level of awareness, both the self and the world that surrounds it constitute the limits of our experienced reality. With each step forward in consciousness, we recognize that what we once took for real was but a shadow, a mistaken certainty. Thus, the journey of the inner self is one of continual revelation. Each advance feels like the final unveiling of truth, and yet there remains a deeper layer beyond. Only when the individual consciousness merges fully with the Absolute, when there is no longer any division between the knower and the known, can one escape the endless illusions spun by Maya and stand in the light of reality itself. Darkness is the originator, light is its offspring, goes an old saying from the East. Light, by its very nature, implies a point of origin, something that emits or reveals it. But when it comes to the first emergence of light, that origin remains hidden, though reason insists that it must exist. This hidden source is what we term darkness, not in a literal sense, but from a standpoint of intellect, which cannot perceive beyond it. All light that follows, no matter how brilliant, is reflected, borrowed, and therefore ultimately illusory. The condition we call darkness is the unchanging womb out of which light arises, and into which it disappears again. On this level of being, nothing must be added or taken away to turn light into darkness or darkness into light. They are mutually convertible. From a scientific view, light is simply one aspect of darkness, and the reverse is also true. Yet both are expressions of a single underlying reality. To science, this appears as an unknowable obscurity. To the average seeker, it presents itself as a dim uncertainty, but to the awakened inner vision of the initiate, it is experienced as the highest form of radiance. The extent to which we can perceive this light within the darkness depends entirely on the refinement of our perception. What appears luminous to one may be total obscurity to another. What one creature sees clearly, another is blind to. The clairvoyant perceives brilliance where ordinary vision detects only shadow. When all things in the cosmos once withdrew into their undifferentiated state, the great repose before manifestation. There was no light to shine, no eye to witness, no center to emit. What filled the infinite expanse was not light, but the formless essence we call darkness. This darkness is not merely absence but potential, the union of principles that, when active, bring forth creation. These principles, often symbolized as the father and the mother, are the fundamental poles within root nature. One active, the other receptive. One spirit, the other substance. From their union emerges the offspring, the manifested universe. During cosmic rest, these polarities dissolve into unity once more, returning all manifested things to their original, undivided state. In this silent interval, only the eternal cause remains, the infinite potential that contains all things in suspension, awaiting the next awakening. This eternal principle, which alone persists through all cycles, is the hidden root behind the periodic appearance and disappearance of the cosmos. When the new day of cosmic activity dawns, differentiation begins again. In symbolic language, the source of all, often called Brahma, encompasses within itself the triad of origin, source, force, and form, or more abstractly, spirit, soul, and body. Each aspect represents a descending phase of divine expression, each a degree of the one breath, cycling through states of involution and evolution. Viewed cosmically, this triad corresponds to the vast universe, its planetary systems, and the earth itself. Spiritually, it manifests as the unknowable divine, its planetary reflection, and humanity, the child of spirit and matter, shaped by both and appearing again and again throughout the great cycles of becoming. The sublime lords, known as the creative spirits or Dayan Chohans, correspond to the spiritual beings referred to in various traditions, much like the Elohim in ancient Hebrew texts or the archangels such as Michael and Gabriel in Christian thought. While figures like Michael are ascribed specific duties over regions of the world in theological doctrine, the esoteric teaching assigns the Dhyanis to the oversight of vast evolutionary cycles. Each of these divine intelligences is said to preside in turn over a particular phase of planetary development and the dominant life form emerging during that era. In their care for the world, they are believed to send forth their human expressions, the bodhisattvas, to act as living bridges between celestial forces and humanity, appearing as guiding lights in every epoch. Out of the full treasury of sacred revelations entrusted to our world, only part has been disclosed to date, as the earth is still passing through one of its middle phases. Accordingly, only a certain number of spiritual teachers of the highest kind have yet emerged. This subject, which is intricate and profound, is reserved for deeper exploration elsewhere. In both Hindu and Buddhist traditions, it is held that only a limited number of essential teachings are accessible at any given time, because each cycle reveals its own portion of the whole. The same idea is reflected in Christian history, where a foundational set of teachings was considered sufficient for its time. Yet, each great stage in human emergence brings with it a new unveiling and fresh messengers, as consciousness ripens and becomes ready to receive more. As time continues, each successive stage will carry its own revelation. The state known as Parinishpanna represents the culmination of perfected existence, the final realization reached by all beings at the end of a grand cycle of activity. It is during the following period of rest that this perfection abides in stillness. This ideal state, named Yongrub in Tibetan, was once explained openly in certain schools of thought, but over time its full meaning became reserved for more concealed teachings, resulting in a wide array of interpretations. Only those who deeply grasp the nature of idealism can come close to its real meaning. One must learn to view all things as mental in nature, except for Parinishpanna itself, which stands as the pure and timeless essence of being. It is in this condition that emptiness, absence of self, and the unseen are understood to be one, a unity that alone is truly self-sustaining. Yet even this seeming finality is not fixed forever, for the very perfection of one state must eventually give way to a greater refinement in a later phase. Just as a fully formed flower must shed its form to yield a fruit, so too must each level of realization dissolve in order for a higher one to emerge. The esoteric teaching affirms that everything, from the tiniest particle to the vastest world system, undergoes unceasing development, a process with no discernible starting point and no ultimate termination. What we call the universe is but one among countless others, each part of an interlinked succession of worlds. Each one is shaped by what preceded it and, in turn, lays the groundwork for what will come next, all bound by the rhythm of a deeper necessity that governs the whole. The coming into being and the dissolution of the cosmos is often described as a rhythmic breathing, a flow in and out of existence. This breathing is without beginning or end, an expression of movement that never ceases. It is one of the great triad of primal realities, along with the limitless expanse and the boundless duration within which all takes place. When this breath goes forth, it becomes the divine expression, as if the hidden source of all things releases a thought that takes on form, the living universe. And when that breath returns inward, the great manifestation dissolves once more into the unseen presence, which then rests quietly, veiled in mystery, until the next pulse of becoming. The phrase, "that which is and yet is not," refers to the great breath, a reality we can only describe as absolute being, though we are unable to conceive of it in any recognizable form, distinct from what we understand as non-being. What we ordinarily divide into past, present, and future is, in esoteric thought, not a true division at all. These are distinctions that arise only within the domain of appearances, having no standing in the deeper, noumenal order. Sacred texts express this truth by declaring that past, present, and what is yet to come are all, in essence, the same. Even that which has not yet arisen already is, in its own way. This perspective is reflected in certain teachings that separated themselves from more concealed traditions, yet preserved a glimpse of the deeper insight. Our understanding of time, and of duration more generally, is inseparable from the way we experience sensations and form associations between them. These perceptions are shaped entirely within the limits of human awareness, and have no real presence apart from the conscious self that experiences them. As that self evolves and frees itself from illusion, the hold of time as we know it begins to fade. What we call time is really just the sequence of inner states that pass through awareness, a stream of changing perspectives that we misinterpret as an external order. A sage once remarked with frustration that the terms past, present, and future are blunt instruments, crude labels applied to what is really a seamless, inward totality. Trying to divide that wholeness is like attempting delicate sculpture with a clumsy tool. It is a fundamental truth in metaphysical teaching that one must come to perceive the absolute, or ultimate reality, in order to avoid being lost in the relative or surface-level illusion. When speaking of the causes that bring about existence, we must look beyond physical explanations alone. Behind all manifest things lies a subtler cause, the longing for existence itself, born from illusion and conditioned by deeper cosmic patterns. This innate urge stirs in every level of reality, from the most minute particle to the grandest celestial body. It mirrors the primal movement of divine intention, a law inherent in the very unfolding of the cosmos. Still, the true origin of this yearning, and of being itself, forever evades complete knowing. The first stirrings of manifestation are abstract beyond imagining, yet they must be accepted as the only fitting source of the tangible world. These pure ideals stand behind the active principles of nature, which later became personified and revered by countless generations in forms that could be more easily grasped. Our minds resist the idea of causeless being. We cannot help but seek a reason for everything. But when we follow this line of thought far enough, we reach a point where the intellect falters, left in silence before the unthinkable. Both religious doctrine and scientific reasoning often leap to this blankness too quickly, failing to explore the profound abstractions that alone can serve as the unseen ground of all material expression. As these initial, formless realities draw nearer to the realm we occupy, they begin to take on greater density and clarity. This gradual thickening continues until they ultimately become the world of sense and matter, a process whereby that which is purely ideal becomes concrete. It mirrors, in its own way, how vapor condenses into liquid and, under the right conditions, transforms into solid form. So too does spirit descend into matter through a subtle and ordered unfolding. The notion of eternal non-being, which is in truth the one true being, may seem contradictory unless one remembers that our conception of being is shaped entirely by the limits of our current awareness. We reduce it to a specific mode of existence, rather than understanding it as a universal principle. If an unborn child were capable of reflection in the way we understand thought, its idea of life would be confined to the womb, since that is all it knows. Were it to contemplate life beyond the womb, which to it might seem like death, it would likely imagine that state as a kind of non-being that somehow represents real being. In a similar way, the one reality is the foundation of all realities, the unseen principle behind every aspect of existence, but we lack the faculties to recognize or perceive it directly. Like flecks of gold hidden in a vast mass of quartz, which cannot be detected by sight alone, but are nonetheless the source of the stone's value, the noumenal essence lies hidden within all phenomena. The miner may not see the gold in the rock, but he knows it is there and understands its worth. This serves as a pale comparison to the way the noumenon lends substance to the world of appearances. The difference, however, is that while the miner can envision the gold extracted and purified, the ordinary person has no image of what truth looks like without the veils of illusion. Only the adept, whose knowledge has been cultivated over many lifetimes and through countless initiatory traditions, is able to perceive the real behind the unreal, the essence where illusion holds no sway. Such a being is called Dangma, one who has attained the purified state of a liberated soul, known as a Jivanmukta, or, more accurately, a Mahatma. The eye that such a sage opens is not to be confused with ordinary clairvoyance or distant vision. Rather, it is an inner, spiritual faculty, a direct perception of truth through intuition, unclouded by the senses. This inner sight is closely related to the third eye of myth and tradition, attributed to ancient and forgotten races, a symbol of profound spiritual perception. It is at this level that the deeper teachings regarding causal chains and the central truths of existence hold their greatest significance, yet these doctrines remain hidden, preserved in secrecy. Meanwhile, contemporary thought seems to circle back toward ancient ideas of an underlying unity behind all apparent diversity, the concept that all multiplicity arises from an original sameness. Biologists pursue the idea of a single living substance, chemists look for a primal material base, and physicists search for the one energy from which all forces are derived. Esoteric philosophy brings this same idea into the metaphysical domain, proposing a fundamental essence behind all appearances. Still, calling it the one form of existence may not fully capture its nature. A more precise term is the Sanskrit word prabhavapyeya, described as the realm or condition from which all things arise and into which all things return. This is not to be confused with common translations like mother of the world, which may mislead by evoking a more literal image. As corrected by certain scholars, the original term more properly refers to the material root or underlying substance of the universe, not simply its nurturing source. While traditional interpretations render it as cause, esoteric philosophy treats it as the inner spiritual impulse of that cause, the formless potential behind all forms. In its secondary expression, this concept is identical with what Buddhist thought names Svabhavat, the eternal interplay of cause and effect, abstract yet omnipresent, the self-sustaining substance from which all existence emerges. It is the subtle and fluid foundation of everything, approached similarly to how Vedantic teaching views the unity of Parabrahman and Mula Prakriti, a single principle seen in two aspects. It is striking that some respected scholars have speculated whether such profound teachings found in Vedanta could have originated through Buddhist influence, when in truth they stem from a shared root far older than either school. Rather than the other way around, it is actually Buddhism as taught by Gautama the Buddha that emerged from and was fully shaped by the principles found in the Secret Doctrine. This system, of which only a brief outline is presented here, also underpins the foundation of the Upanishads. According to the teachings of Sri Sankaracharya, this relationship is unquestionable. In Eastern esoteric thought, dreamless sleep is identified as one among various distinct states of consciousness. In each of these, a different level of the mind is engaged, or as a Vedantic philosopher might put it, the self becomes aware through another dimension of its being. In this framework, the phrase dreamless sleep is used symbolically to describe a condition of the cosmos itself, a state that mirrors in a certain sense that human experience where nothing is recalled upon awakening, though the person was not in true unconsciousness. This is comparable to how a hypnotized individual, though speaking and acting with clarity during the trance, will later remember none of it once returned to their usual awareness. Here we arrive at a topic that has stirred philosophical debate for generations. The terms aleya and paramartha have long divided schools of thought, each interpreting them in different ways and thereby fragmenting what could be a unified understanding. Aleya may be described as the universal soul, the animating essence behind all things, akin to the oversoul spoken of by Emerson. Esoterically, its nature is said to transform cyclically. While on the highest, ineffable planes, aleya remains eternal and unchanging, beyond the reach of even divine intelligences. Its influence on the lower levels of being shifts as the universe moves through its active phases. During such a period, aleya is united in spirit and substance with celestial beings, and even a human deeply immersed in the discipline of meditation may come into union with it. This state, while not identical with nirvana, comes very near to it, and it is this distinction that leads to contention. Within the Mahayana tradition, the Yogacarya philosophers describe aleya as the embodiment of emptiness itself. Yet at the same time, it is said to be the source and foundation of all that is seen and unseen. Though it remains eternal and unchanging in its core, aleya reflects itself in all things, just as the moon is mirrored in still waters. Some disagree with this dual view. Similarly, interpretations of paramartha vary. The Yogacaryas view it as something that arises in dependence upon other conditions, a relative understanding. In contrast, the Madhyamaka school defines it as representing the ultimate, unconditioned truth, the realization of perfect knowledge. In discussing these two truths, the first group maintains that only conventional truth, relative and shaped by perception, is present in this world. The second insists that absolute truth, though hidden, is real and attainable. A revered teaching declares, "No arhat seekers may attain full knowledge unless he becomes one with the supreme cessation." In that journey, two powerful hindrances are identified, parakalpita and paratantra. The first, known in Tibetan as kuantag, refers to false belief, the illusion that something exists when it does not, such as the false assumption of an independent self. The second, paratantra, refers to that which exists only in reliance on other causes. It is transient, ceasing when the support that upholds it is withdrawn, like the flame of a lamp which disappears the moment its fuel is spent. Esoteric philosophy holds that all things possess life and awareness, though not necessarily in the same way as humans or animals experience them. Life, in this view, is regarded as the single and fundamental mode of being, expressing itself through what we call matter, or, in the case of human beings, through what we conventionally divide into spirit, soul, and matter, though such distinctions are ultimately artificial. Matter serves as the expression of soul on this plane of reality, while soul itself is the medium through which spirit is revealed on a higher level. These three, spirit, soul, and matter, are unified by life itself, which permeates and unites them as one. The notion of a living universe is not new, but a recovered insight now re-emerging in modern thought, freed as it has become from the limitations of a theological worldview centered on human traits. Although current scientific thought stops at pointing toward the signs of life present in all things, it still hesitates to speak aloud the ancient idea of a world soul. Only recently, referring to the time when Blavatsky wrote this book, has science begun to entertain concepts such as life within crystalline structures, ideas that would have once been dismissed out of hand. Plant physiologists now search for structures in flora that serve a role comparable to nerves in animals, not because they expect plants to possess feeling or cognition in the same way, but because something must account for the processes of growth and nourishment. It becomes increasingly difficult for scientific language, no matter how it leans on neutral terms like energy or force, to conceal the fact that wherever life is present, one must admit the presence of living beings, whether they be microscopic particles or celestial bodies. This raises the question of how this teaching is treated in the inner esoteric traditions. What do the deeper schools, particularly those aligned with Buddhist esotericism, have to say on the matter? Within these teachings, aleya carries more than one meaning. In the contemplative Mahayana tradition known as Yogacarya, aleya is recognized both as the universal essence, akin to the world soul, and also as the deeper self of an advanced adept. One who is disciplined in the path of inner union is said to be capable of entering, through meditative insight, into direct contact with the true ground of being, by merging with this aleya. According to Arya Sangha, who stood as a counterpart to the thinker Nagarjuna, aleya exists in an absolute and timeless way. In one respect, it corresponds to what is termed the primal source, described in certain ancient texts as the undivided origin of all things, subtle and eternal, encompassing both what is manifest and what lies unformed. Yet the term usually used, prakriti, does not fully convey this principle, and aleya may offer a clearer meaning. Prakriti is not the same as the unmanifested divine ground, a confusion often made by those unfamiliar with the global and ancient roots of esoteric knowledge. It is especially mistaken among those who reject the idea that a foundational revelation existed at the beginning of human development. The concept of a world soul, the one life underlying all, was not first introduced by thinkers like Anaxagoras. Rather, he simply reasserted this idea to challenge the rigid materialism of Democritus, whose outer teaching emphasized the aimless movement of atomic particles. Anaxagoras, like Plato after him, did not originate this doctrine but served to re-articulate it. What he called the ruling principle of the cosmos, a higher awareness distinct from matter and functioning with intentionality, had already long been described in older Indian teachings as the universal breath, the animating current, the Jivatma. But unlike later European thought, these early sages never imagined this ultimate principle as possessing the limited quality of thought in the human sense, since it was held to be infinite. This brings us naturally to consider how the idea of an absolute spirit is portrayed in German philosophical systems, which offer a useful contrast. Thinkers like Schelling and Fichte diverged significantly from the original archaic vision of a foundational reality, reflecting only a fragment of what the Vedanta articulates. Even the idea of an absolute spirit, as found in von Hartmann's vision of the unconscious, despite its resemblance to certain aspects of non-dualist Indian thought, still remains a partial glimpse, unable to fully capture the nature of the truth those ancient teachings pointed toward. Hegel proposed that the unconscious principle would never have engaged in the immense and intricate process of generating the cosmos unless it was striving toward a realization of full self-awareness. However, when some Western pantheists refer to spirit, a term often substituted for the ineffable source or supreme principle, as unconscious, they do not mean it in the ordinary psychological sense. Instead, the word functions as a placeholder, a way to indicate a mystery beyond familiar categories, especially in the absence of personality. This ultimate awareness, which lies beyond the veil of appearances, is labeled unconscious not because it lacks intelligence or activity, but because it transcends all forms of subjectivity and personhood as understood by the human mind. Human understanding, grounded as it is in empirical experience, cannot penetrate the depths of that which exceeds time, form, and individuality. Only a liberated essence may begin to glimpse, however dimly, the truth of its origin and final destination. But even the loftiest spiritual beings, at the peak of their evolution, stand in reverent unknowing before the ineffable presence of the Absolute. For even when individual awareness seems to dissolve into the boundless totality, the finite cannot contain or measure the infinite, nor can it grasp it using familiar modes of thought and perception. Thus, it cannot rightly be said that the Supreme Source, often referred to as unconscious in philosophical language, carries within itself a desire or movement toward a clearer self-recognition. A follower of Vedanta would firmly reject such a claim, and one versed in esoteric philosophy would clarify that such an idea may apply only to the awakened universal mind, which emerges as the first reflection of the immutable origin within the phenomenal world, but not to the unmanifest source itself. It is taught that spirit and matter, or Purusha and Prakriti, are but two faces of the one indivisible essence. The ordering intelligence, the inner soul animating all, pulses within every speck of existence, active in humans, dormant in stone, and varying in potency throughout nature. This concept, of a unifying life-soul imbuing the cosmos, is among the most ancient in thought. What was once known as the archeus, long before Paracelsus or his disciple Van Helmont discussed it, is the same subtle energy or etheric root, the foundation behind the countless phenomena of vitality, now made particular in various forms. All such philosophical systems, though differing in expression, return to this primordial teaching. The term Anyupadika, meaning without parentage, bears several symbolic meanings within esoteric thought. Often it refers to celestial intelligences, the Dayan Chohans or spiritual Buddhas, though it also applies to their human counterparts when they have transcended the ordinary self and become united with their higher principles, the essence of Atma and Buddhi. In such a state, their former personality is absorbed, and they are regarded as beings of diamond-like purity, or Vajrasattvas, true adepts. The hidden Lord, merged in unity with the Supreme Source, is self-born, being identical with the all-encompassing Spirit, the self-existent reality, or Svabhavat in its highest mode. The structure of this hierarchy, with Anyupadika at its summit as the universal spirit soul and at its base the perfected human being, is a profound mystery. Even the ordinary human soul holds this parentless potential within. Therefore, when referring to the cosmos in its original, formless state, prior to being shaped by the divine architects, it is said, the universe was Anyupadika. To quote Hegel again, who with Schelling practically accepted the pantheistic conception of periodical avatars, special incarnations of the world spirit in man, as seen in the case of all the great religious reformers. The essence of man is spirit. Only by stripping himself of his finiteness and surrendering himself to pure self-consciousness does he attain the truth. Christ-man, as man in whom the unity of God-man, identity of the individual with the universal consciousness as taught by the Vedantins and some Advaitis, appeared, has, in his death and history generally, himself presented the eternal history of spirit, a history which every man has to accomplish in himself in order to exist as spirit.